Well, this is Baruch Fleischman. I'm back here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel after a really nice Shavuos. And coming over here is I want to remind everyone that the purpose of the Tikkun Elevator Kollel is to get us into the idea of learning Zohar every day. Maybe we don't, maybe we do. Maybe it's over our head, maybe we have a little something else, but we want to learn it enough to be able to learn and listen to the Zohar every day. But at the same time, we do some other things, and now we're going to come back over to a place that we've been before. This is the hardcover version. Hardcover costs $58 on Amazon, and this is really a good book. Now, originally, I think that Rabbi Yaakov Kronenberg didn't have enough money or enough backing to be able to produce this other than the paperback, which is a kind of clumsy book. But now, apparently, it's grown to such extent that it has a hardcover, and it really makes a lot of difference. Now we're going to get started in a new subject now. We've been talking about the horoscope, and let me just stop this for a second and get myself some little material here, and I'll be right with you. So while I was away, I realized that I needed some kind of a primitive drawing to be able to understand what we're talking about. And so they're basically, although they're not really well drawn, but these are the 12 houses. These are the 12 houses, right? 1, 2, 3. So he's going to start talking. He was talking before about when you count from a fulfillment of the first house is found in the 10th house. It's always found 10 houses away. Then counting 10 houses from that, you come to the 4th house, or come to the 7th house rather. Then counting 10 houses for that, you come to the 4th house. And he had said in the previous lecture that the 10th house is the house of career. The 7th house is the house of your mate. If you have a good career, you can find a mate. And the 4th house is the house of family or home with children and so on and so forth. That kind of idea. All that is a fulfillment of the idea of the first house. Now we're going to go on now. We're going to go to different kinds of counts that he's going to go through. And it's very interesting because he did talk to me about these things years back. And now reading his book and going into it more deeply, I see how it works, some of it. So let's just start off by reading what Rabbi Yaakov has got to say here and get into some of these ideas. This is the beginning of chapter 2, and it says like this. So counting 10 houses forward, now in astrology, forward is counterclockwise, is where the fulfillment is. We have explained that the basic fulfillment of the first house, which is you, is in the career, which is in the 10th house, which is 10 houses from the first house. This is the more worldly way, or the American way. Now, the first question everybody asks you in America is, what is your job? What do you do for a living? How do you make money? But in a mystical way, the fulfillment is 10 houses going backwards, which is clockwise, which is the home and the family, which is the 4th house. So in Israel, if you live in the religious circle, the first question they ask you is, are you married? And then they ask you how many kids you have. So this is the difference between the two countries. Two lifestyles, two different mindsets. You see right away that America is after the money with a career. I remember my teacher in America who said when he first came to America from Hungary, he spent his first 2 years there in public library, learning about all the different careers so he could guide people in their proper careers because he knew how important that was. Because that was what the Americans wanted. And so when I came to Israel, I came having been taught the American approach, which I was always taught to ask people, what do you do for a living? So when I did this in Israel, I started receiving replies from people that this was not a question that anybody worked for, or that worked for them. In other words, they didn't like this much, didn't do anything, since this is not necessarily their priority in life. They really care about family. It made my task all the much harder to be an astrologer here in Israel. Now, he says a new idea here that he really wants to get into, and I really like this idea. It says like this: let's start working with the number 8. There was once a story about the students of the Arizal. The Arizal was the great Kabbalist from the late 1400s and the early 1500s, who lived in Safat and is considered to be the greatest Kabbalist of the last 500 or 600 years. And the students came to him and they asked him, now that we don't have the prophets, how do we know what our destiny is? In other words, when the prophets were alive, a person would go to the prophet. He would tell him what his work was in this world, how he had to adapt himself, what he needed to do. But now that we don't have the prophets, how do they know what our work is supposed to be? So the Rizal answered. He told them simply like this: you should concentrate on two things. One is the thing that you enjoy doing more than anything else, and the other is the thing that you find the most difficult to do. In a general way, this is what you have to work on in this lifetime. Okay, that's the Ariya Kodesh. Now, we're going to start working with the number 8. Now, let me see, what did I do here with that little drawing that I made? Okay, I've got to get it handy. So the number 8 is the number for death. This world is all about the number 7. We have 7 days of the week, 7 years of the Shemitah cycle, the sabbatical cycles, the 7 planets, the 7 heavens, the 7 colors, the 7 musical notes, this land, the 7 lands, etc. So this 7 is the basic number. It's just a number of malchus. So the number 8 is the number for transcendence. The number of going, the number of going into the next world, going above and beyond the world of 7, which is the world of this ball. And in astrology, the 8th house is the house of death. It's Scorpio. It's the house of death. Now, how do we get to that? He's going to explain. Besides being the house of death, the 8th house can also tell you about what the most difficult thing is for a person. It is like where the person dies. So it's like metaphorically. It's where a person sputters out and can't keep going. Each sign has a house where it dies in. Now, let me see if I can get this up here where I can see it better. So each house, he says, where was that? So the number, so he says, each house has a house where it dies in. And you see what causes its death. And that is what is really difficult for a person when he has to experience that house. So exactly what do we mean by this? So let us take a look at it. Now, he's just talking about the circle of life, the circle of the zodiac. We will go forward, which is counterclockwise, and then do it backwards, going clockwise, and be able to try to see what's going on with this combination of 8s. So let's try to experience it in both directions, in the secular, worldly way, and the mystical way. Let us start with the secular way and try to give some examples. I want to show you something very important. We've talked a lot about the ascendant being the whole chart. The ascendant is about 80% of the chart. Now, if listening, I just tell you that listening to astrologers who really don't know this that well, they don't say this. They really think the sun is the most important part of the chart, and they go from there. Here you see that the ascendant is the whole chart, because where everything starts is what matters. But it is more than just a sign of the ascendant. So let's go over to our chart over here. So here we are. And he writes like this: the ascendant, so the Aries is the ascendant, in the ascendant is going to have Taurus in the 2nd house. So this is Aries, this is Taurus. So he says in the 2nd house. Gemini will be in the 3rd house. Where are we here? The 3rd house. The 4th house will be Cancer. Let me read him. Cancer in the 4th, and so on. And so then going on, you would have Leo in the 5th house, Virgo in the 6th. The 7th would be Libra. The 8th is Scorpio. The 9th is Sagittarius. The 10th is Capricorn. The 11th is Aquarius. And the 12th is Pisces. So he's going to go through these. And we'll get in the next few lessons, we'll get into that. So he says Cancer in the 4th and so on, and people don't really look at all the cusps in to learn about each house, what each house teaches you. And then you have to look at the variations of each sign. For example, now let's take Aries, he says. So Aries is the 1st house. So this is actually the chart of Adam Arishon, is that Aries is the 1st house. So he says if you count 8 houses, that is the counterclockwise, which is this way, right? Clockwise that way, counterclockwise. is going to have Scorpio in the 8th house. Okay, let me see if I can get everything lined up here on the page. So he says, then the Aries person is likely to die in Scorpio. Now, why would Scorpio kill Aries? Now, Taurus, on the other hand, is likely to die 8 houses away in Sagittarius. From each cusp, one can learn more and more things about your basic life and mazel. In other words, from what a person is not, let's say what a person is not, you can learn what he is. So the count of 8 going either way is about what a person is not, because that's what he means by death. It's a place where you can't manifest yourself. You can't live out because it's going the wrong direction. So he says, and if you use the clockwise method, then the 8th house is going backwards from Aries, ascendant, will be the 6th house. So here's count. Let's count backwards. Let's go over here. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the 6th house. What's the matter with the 6th house? Which is the house of servitude, which does not go down well with Aries. Adam Rishon had an Aries on his first cusp, and we talked about that before. And this language of Aries on the cusp is the language that astrologers use. It means that's where Aries starts, and it's the house of Aries. And if you go counterclockwise from forward by 8, you get to the 8th house, whose cup has the constellation of Scorpio. So let's count counterclockwise and go like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There it is, number 8. You get to the 8th house, whose cup is the constellation of Scorpio. So it is interesting. Aries and Scorpio, they have a very strong thing in common, which is that they are both ruled by Mars. They're both Martian planets. Now listen to what he says. It's very interesting. The planet of war, the planet of violence and bloodshed. It's the color red. So how can it be that Aries will die in Scorpio, since they have this in common? Before I can answer that, I want to quote Ptolemy. Ptolemy was a great Greek astrologer. He was really the father of Greek astrology and of Western astronomy. And he wrote a book called the Tetrabiblios, which means the 4 books. That was one of the first astrology texts after the Sefer Yetzirah, and it has a chapter of 100 aphorisms. And I want to read you one of his aphorisms, because you will now be able to understand it. This is the aphorism number 37. It goes like this. If a Virgo or Pisces will be on the ascendant, the native will create his own dignity. Now it says so here's Aries, right? And its opposite is going to be Libra. So it's either if you're in this or in that. He says that the person will create his own destiny. That is if Virgo or Pisces. I said this wrong. So it's if Virgo or Pisces will be on the ascendant. Here's Virgo and here's Pisces. Wait a minute. Got it wrong again. If number 6, it really goes like this. Number 6 is on the ascendant. Or number 12 here is on the ascendant. In other words, that's where the chart begins. He says, then you're going to have it on the ascendant, the native will create his own dignity. But if an Aries or a Libra is on the ascendant, that's where I was before, he will cause his own death. The other signs are to be contemplated in the same way. Now, that's the shir for today. We have to wait till tomorrow and see if we can get a little more insight into this. This is Baruch Fleischman. I'm Tikkun Elevator calling you, Kolel, reminding you to start thinking about learning Zohar every day.